Hello and welcome into the Sorare Data Show. I am Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Joined back today, with two superstar guests who I've been dying to talk to since I was off. Yowzaa, Peter. mpenn. Oh man, I switched that up. I'm a little rusty here. Mike. Guys, thanks for coming on. And I'm really glad that you guys were willing to do this after battling each other for a few auctions before I went on vacation. And I was like, I'm not sure this is going to happen. Like, Peter's all excited. I'm going to get this card. And then he's like, wait a minute. What the?
Yeah,
so
that
I'm
was
glad you guys can put that behind you and join me today.
Complete rush of blood to the head. Sorry, Pete. I owe you one or two for that.
I was upset with you until I realized that you were an actual Newcastle fan. Not just like, oh, I want this card. I was like, all right, forgiveness is warranted.
I think it happened 2 or 3 times. Obviously, like, I didn't realize that you were the highest bidder, and then I go and put a bid in, and then you message me. You're like, again, seriously? But each of the 3 times that it happened, it was karma, because then I was outbid as well. Someone else came above, so neither of us got the card. So, how's your Newcastle collection coming along now?
It's coming along good. I kept on wanting to buy Guimaraes, and it got to a price point where I was like, I'm just going to get Bruno Fernandes instead. But I still working on that. Yeah, just a different one. It was like a $10 difference, and I was like, nah, I mean, this doesn't make sense to me.
I like how it took Mike 3 times about bidding you to finally be like, okay, I'll stop.
Well, it's probably smart by Sorare. You can't see who you're outbidding if you're just on the auction screen. It just puts you probably to be like, oh, that's my buddy. I'm just going to pick the next auction up. So
I've gotten, I think, 2 of those messages. The whole like, are you really going after this card? And I was like, I'm sorry. I just didn't even look. I just saw and clicked. And anyway, thank you everybody for coming in. DNP Donkey first in. How about that? Bob Franklin and Tuggy on the podium. Congrats to you guys. Kev Heard, what's up? Maddie Sorare, Ben Johnson. Everybody's back. I say everybody's back. You guys were probably all here. I'm the one who's back. Martin, what's up? Shaforkle. Ooh, what is this? How would you guys pronounce that name? Tizai?
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 It is I?
It is I? Oh. I'm so slow on stuff like that. It's crazy. Anyway, Juju, what's up? Mucci? Maybe you're Italian. Jakob, what's up? Stefan, Nixon. It's just a lot of people here. Thank you, everyone, for coming in. Do you guys remember what card it was that you, the first one that you fought over?
It was Pope. It was Nick Pope. I was in a meeting, I think. And then I come out of the meeting to like get the notification. I'm like, oh man, who outbid me? And if the one person when we were like discussing, all right, no.
All right, let me start with you, Peter, because it seems like you, I mean, both of you have been, but you, I feel like have attacked this pretty significantly. You sold a bunch of cards early on in preparation for this new season. How has your experience been with these early access cards and auctions?
I would say it's been really good. I would say I really like that they're pumping out a lot of the new cards. I think it makes it conducive so everybody who wants a card can pay a card without that feeling that I'm going to have to pay so much, and then that fear looming over me.
Unless Mike's bidding against you.
Unless Mike's bidding against me. But I think it's felt like a nice balance. I was a little shocked and overwhelmed with how much they pumped out on the first day of Champions, just because I couldn't keep like more than 3 or 4 tabs open on my computer without like my computer starting to crash. And I know we all like to like crap on Apple computers for not being super spec'd out, but like it shouldn't be crashing, having that hard of a time after just a few tabs. So that was just a little overwhelming. And I think we saw a lot of good prices. I think a lot of people who bought on the first day are probably still pretty happy with their purchases. And now I think we're starting to see some of that FOMO tick up, and we'll kind of see where that's balanced out. But yeah, it's been a good process so far.
Mike, you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I've been impressed with it. And speaking of FOMO, Peter, I looked, was it last night? And when you open up the homepage and it's like 3 days remaining of the promo, and I was like, shit, only 3 days remaining. Like I need to buy some more cards, because the whole thrill of a potential extra card or whatever drew me in. But no, I think volumes, and we can get into it a little bit later. I think, as we have spoken about, I think on a podcast together before, or at least over Discord or whatever, I think we've all had the impression that it's very positive that they're getting out an awful lot of stock early in the season, giving people an opportunity to pick the cards that they want ahead of the season. I think, everyone's talking about early access, but we've kind of actually neglected the fact that this is the first time we've ever had cards before a season starts. And if you think about that, it's really, well, okay, maybe it's a given in other areas, but I think that's a great thing there. I see Vita saying they used to release hundreds of rare cards day one. Interesting, probably before my time anyway. I think it's been good. I think volume-wise on Sorare, they're probably pretty happy with what they've done. But again, it's what we've spoken about before, is this sort of thought process of it being seasonal and working in kind of transfer windows, where the majority of the user base will spend the majority of their disposable income that they want to on Sorare cards during these short blasts. Remains to be seen how the remainder of the season pans out. But yeah, excited to follow along.
I think most people were kind of understanding the fact that we were going to see like a ton of cards early on. The day one rush was a bit overwhelming, and it did seem like they slowed the auction pretty considerably literally on day two. Yeah. And I feel like some of the feedback I saw was basically what we were expecting, and yet it was presented in a way that it was like, wait, why is the 11 of 100 so much cheaper than the 2 of 100? And it's like, well, it's just naturally how it's going to go. There are more cards. If you wanted the card, you had to go get it. Have you guys bought any instant buys, or have you just stuck to the auctions?
I'm primarily playing in limited, so the auction buys are like being $5 or $6 more sometimes. They just are appealing from my convenience standpoint, and a little bit of that FOMO feeling of, oh, it just takes one other person to bid and then get involved, and then the price starts spiraling upwards, and I could have gotten that instant buy for cheaper than the auction. So I've definitely grabbed a few where I'm just thinking the price is just going to fly up. And because I'm a little lazy, I think I picked up one the other day just because, the promo's running out in a few days. I just want to go ahead and snap my card in and get it.
Have you got anything in the promo? Sorry to cut you off there, Mike.
I've gotten a lot of Essence. I did get, I bought a Gordon, and then I got a Dan Burn alongside of my Anthony Gordon, which I was excited about because it's still like a usable player for in-season prem. It's not the greatest player, but it's a guy that can fill out a roster spot in a good matchup, and just as an extra piece to have. Plus the collection score bonus is really nice. I think I was a little confused partially on the marketing side of things, because it seemed like you were always going to get some player of the same tier, especially just because I would see online someone getting a card and then they would get a card from a different club of the same tier and be like, okay, so it's matched by tier. So there's an incentive for me to get star cards, because there's a good chance I could get another star card even if they don't have one on the team. But didn't learn that until after I bought Gordon.
Mike, how have you been on the instant buys? Yeah, I think I've taken 2 instant buys. I've been a little bit more patient with trying to win a few auctions. Similar strategy to Peter. I'm just having a bit of fun with Premier League Limited at the moment. So yeah, I had a couple of instant buys, had a couple of wins on the promotions. Again, similar story, not of the same tier on Isak that I bought, I won an Emil Kraft, who I highly doubt is the same tier. And then bought an Odegaard, and that won me a Zinchenko. I mean, I can't complain. As you say, it's quite nice on the collection bonus bit, an extra 30 points or whatever it is from a collection bonus standpoint. So yeah, I think it's been really interesting, the psychology of it, in terms of knowing, hey, they're going to keep churning out limiteds over the next few weeks, but there's this opportunity of potentially getting a free card or even some essence. I've built up quite a lot of essence. I've got a bunch of 3s and 5s and whatever, it all adds up. So it's really interesting where I'm like, yeah, but I could just wait. Like, I could very easily give it a couple of weeks. But as you mentioned, I was looking just before this call at a couple of like star cards that they've minted a lot of. So Rodri and Mbappe, in limited. So as you referenced, like in the first day, there were 17 Rodris sold, either by auction or instant buy, and 15 Mbappes. Day 2, it was 12 and 14 respectively. Now they're down to like 3 or 4 a day each. So it really has tailed off quite a bit. And actually, the interesting thing, I still need to do a little bit further analysis on it, but it seems like the instant buys aren't necessarily impacting their auction rate. So if people are instant buying, they're still planning to put out 15 Rodris a day, 15 stars a day on that day. And then the next day, if it's 7 stars that's meant to go out and there's 2 instant buys gone, it'll still be 7 auctions. They're not chopping the auctions, based on the instant buys, which is interesting.
Did you guys use classic card prices to help you decide what to pay for your in-season, or was it once this in-season started going, it was kind of like there was no, I don't want to say that there was like no fair value, but it's almost like the multiple didn't matter. You just had to kind of pay what other people were paying.
That was another one that was playing on my head, because I was looking at even just silly, like Fabian Schär, right? Like, I think you could have bought his new season card for, what was it, like 13, 14 euro or something? But the old season card you could get for €2.50. And I just couldn't bring myself to be like 4 or 5x what an old season was. I'm like, no, that's not value, but probably would be. I just need to buy it because other people are paying it. So it's been funny to see, like, across the tiers, how some cards are 4 or 5x, whereas some other cards are, 1.2x and very, very little difference between them. I noticed a couple of challenger cards already now at this level are nearly, there's a few cards I noticed that were like for like nearly, very in line with classic season prices, which is interesting.
I think it's all kind of on the wayside. Like, when I'm in an auction and I feel like the price is fair, because I'll pay for it, because I just kind of think over the course of the year, I'd like to get about 70 to 80% of it back. Because I think, okay, I can still win essence with it in the future. I think 70 to 80% of the value I pay feels pretty fair. Like, I've done pretty good. Getting 100% or more is awesome, but like at the end of the day, like, I don't want to stress myself about winning everything back, because that takes a little bit of the joy out of it. But I have been a little bit surprised by some of the star prices. Now, I recognize 1.5 times maybe $100 is still $50 more. But the fact that it's only been maybe 1.3 to like 1.7% or 1.7 times higher than the classic cards feels a little shocking. I know that people can use classic cards, a single classic card in like one of their in-season lineups, but you still want to like surround that star card with other star cards. Like, I don't want to be supporting that star card with tier 2s. It just feels like I can get more value. I can sort of buy points, in a sense, like, that are really valuable between getting a 350 score and a 400 score. Those 50 more points are extremely valuable. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that price difference is being reflected in the stars right now. And I just feel like there's a lot of value there. They're still expensive, but I think there's value, especially compared to like a Schär. Not that that's the wrong move. Collection bonus, extra pieces, they're important. I've found them to be really important playing classic or in-season challenger, to have like my Messi at, I think it's like 16-15% right now already. But you need star cards, and I think they're great prices.
Do you think part of that is just kind of the raw fiat amount that kind of hinders star cards from going so much higher, that it's easier to pay $8 for a card that is normal, you know, whose classic card is $2 because it's only a $6 difference, but like you're not going to go from 200 to 800. And so at some point your budget is just capped. And enough people, if it's capped, it's like, I cannot spend 3x for a Saka, but I can spend 5x for a Dan Burn.
I mean, I agree with you. I personally think that's, you know, you should never exceed your budget. I'll never say that, but it just like, I think that's where we kind of get stuck in our psychology of things. It's just like, oh, it's just $6. Like, I'll get this player who's okay to fill out a lineup, but like, it's not better value in my mind. Like, it's better value to get the star card that can get you that 10 extra points. Those 10 points between 390 and 400 could be worth $50 or $80. When you compare it to 340 to 350, that might be worth $5. Like, there's just a huge difference there. And then you put that together over multiple game weeks. Like, that's where I think like the value is being missed a little bit.
Laird, what about you? I just had a look at your gallery there, and apart from your Midtjylland collection, you haven't been that active at picking up new cards. What's your plan of attack or your thought process?
I had no plan to buy early season, like early access Prem cards or La Liga or Bundesliga or any champion. And I bought like a couple non-Midtjylland challenger ones. I've been playing contender in season for months. And so those cards are still going. So I was willing to just like let those keep playing. And I wanted to kind of solidify what I had going already in challenger and contender before I went to champion. And so I just haven't gotten to the point where I feel like I'm strong enough in those regions. But the FOMO is killer. And it's like, I forget who I was listening to, but they were talking about like buying Prem cards and stuff. And it was just like, oh, it was somebody who like got a deal. And I was like, man, is that only how much it costs? And then you just go down the rabbit hole of like, how much would it cost to do? And one of the things, and I was actually going to ask you guys this because part of my FOMO like led me down here, but both of you, it seemed early on, we were like, you were going to focus on limited. What we were seeing, at least on literally day one or in the few early days, were in-season limiteds, like early access limiteds, were almost the same price as classic rares. And the multiples for rares in terms of in-season or, early access versus classic seem to be smaller than limited. And so I was curious if you guys looked at rare prices at all and thought, maybe I'll play rare.
Yeah, sort of thought about it and said I will, and then never really did. Just sort of looked at a couple of goalkeepers and thought about, shifting. I'm currently working with a predominantly Brazilian gallery right now. They've still got sort of 15, 16 games plus some continental games. So I was sort of like, shall I try and shift these now and raise a few funds and build a rare team? The one thing that actually stopped me in that was limited. I don't mind so much. I'm going to start from Division 5. And I just thought like rare might be a little bit more competitive to try and get promoted, which that sounds weird to say. Of course, there's going to be more people in limited, but I'm buying the best of the best in limited, where I feel like I don't want to throw a budget to buy the best of the best in Champion Europe or Prem in the rare division. I would have tried to do it a little bit more tactically. Might have taken a bit more time to get up the divisions and might not have been as worthwhile as limited. I could be proven wrong potentially. I know Peter's got some pretty strong lineups for Division 5 opening weekend, and I'm sure there's plenty of others who have dipped their toes in Premier League and Champ for the first time. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But I was tempted, but I haven't done it yet. That's not to say I won't.
Yeah. So first of all, talking about Division 5, I think, we should all be expectant that Division 5 in Prem and maybe even Champion are going to be pretty competitive. I think there's going to be an influx of new users, or maybe not new users, but new Champion players like myself. And we're going to see a pretty bloated Division 5 and then Division 4, Division 3 until like things balance out a little bit. Because my expectations, there's just going to be a huge number. So we'll see some pretty competitive scores. We'll probably see some disappointments of people who score really high and then don't get the best prize. But I think we need to all let that shake out a little bit and acknowledge that that's going to be the case to start. For Rare itself, I briefly thought about it, but then my mind quickly came to the fact that, let's say I did that in Limited. Like in Limited, I know I'm playing against people with collection bonuses, lots of XP, people who have held these cards for a while, and it's just the scoring is going to be really competitive. And it's not really that different in my mind for the rare cards. Like there's going to be lots of people who have great collection scores and are going to be able to stack all the best teams with loaded XP. And I'm going to be coming in without all of the star cards or without collection bonus, trying to compete, and it's going to be difficult. And I think I'm just going to feel more frustrated trying to play that, even though the value seems the same. And then the bonus part with in-season Limited that I really love is just that 50% of entrants, basically for each division, get a box. You win something, and you're going to win less in that classic season rare competitions. And I want to win stuff. Like that's the fun part. It's fun on Tuesday opening up and seeing, especially if you get a box or something that you don't know what you're going to win. And I didn't want to replace that feeling. Like that's a fun thing to look forward to. So that was kind of my thought process. Maybe it was misguided. I also just worry about classic competitions 2, 3, 4 years from now, how you're going to need to have collection scores and star cards to be succeeding. And it just feels like a lot to have to continually buy and keep up with. Limited, I can just go on an instant buy, spend $15 on someone for the game week and be excited about it.
Yeah, the other thing to add there as well is like if you look at the prize pools, right? And if we just take first Premier League Division 1 versus in Limited versus Premier League Division 1 first for rare, it's double the pot, right? So it's $1,500 versus $3,000. So okay, there's going to be a lot less competition in terms of volume, but Laird, you were referencing like classic cards were, just above, people were paying crazy for Limited new season versus classic, but new season rares on average, they're floating somewhere like 6x new season limiteds, give or take. So if we do 6x the price for double the pot, you need to win more than 3 times as often than you would in Limited to make it pay off. Or that's how my brain works anyway. So I'm sort of like, and again, as you say, Peter, it's a bit more throwaway. If I need to plug a hole in a Limited lineup one week, I can kind of do that and don't really care about the budget. Whereas rare, you've kind of got to, make a decision. So that's also part of the reason I've given it a miss. But that's not to say anyone who's gone into rares have made a very good decision, and hopefully, if they've chosen Newcastle cards, they'll do very well.
So no thought to play super rare?
Wrong podcast. Wrong guests. No, I'm joking. No, genuinely not. Yeah,
you're not joking, actually.
No, I'm not really joking, but yeah, it's not even a risk thing. It's more just like, yeah, I don't really want to have that amount of money into a JPEG.
I think it's partially that. It's a lot of money, but it's also with super rare, it's a lot more playing than Limited and rare. like I can just look a game week or two out and be like, okay, I'm in Sorare data lineup builders. Let me see what my holes might be. In Super Rare, I feel like I need to plan like months in advance because I don't know if that card's going to be available, especially if you're playing in season. And like, it's just, and then you have that natural uncertainty where you buy a card and what if they get injured or suspended or whatever for that matchup. It's just too long term, too much of a lack of a supply. It's just, it feels like a lot more work. And that's just not the work that I want to put into, not the level I want to be in at this game. I want to be able to log in a week before, instant buy, pay 2x the normal price just for a player, and say that I'm getting collection score for it and enjoy my time. But it's just, that's how I feel about Super Rare. And that's the same for Unique too. I think the incentives there need to be greater than just cash prizes. I think it needs to be experiences, truly exclusive stuff that you can only get up there.
That's fair. So one of the things that I feel like, Mike, you wrote about, and for anyone who hasn't seen it recently, if you just go to medium.com/ I guess it's at mpenn10. I'll just drop it in the live chat here. You were talking about, or the example you used was the Rodri rares and how far along they have minted them and kind of what we expect over the next, basically the rest of the season, and when we can expect the rest of the supply. And from the limited perspective, we don't really have the same, I mean, obviously we don't have the same total min count, but like, it's almost like we can see where they can fit. We can easily see where they can finish the rares in terms of like, it's easier to map it out. Whereas I don't think we're expecting to see 1,000 limiteds of every player, but we are probably expecting to see 100 rares. And so what's the sort of the difference that you see, even from like a gameplay perspective, of at some point we know every rare is going to be allocated. But for those who play limited, it's kind of like there probably will always be one available. And it does seem like it'll run out at some point. So how do you kind of, what's your thought of like playing that way if you're playing rare, of if I don't get the cards now, I might not actually get one?
Yeah, well, I think it's like getting the cards now. Obviously, you want to. I think the collection bonus plays into it, and the building XP. You want to start off as early as possible, have a chance week one. That plays into it. But I mean, limited. We're now at the last few seasons, right? We've maybe hit 500 editions of some players, but not really much past that. Yeah. That I think obviously Sorare have the headroom to go to 1,000 if they want to, and to be honest, the Rodris and Mbappes of this world, we're nearly up to 100 so far. If we think of their allocation that they can give out versus what they'll hold back for rewards, that total allocation is probably somewhere between 600 and 700. Of course, auction rates and things like that will slow down, but I think that's a really tactical play from them now over the course of the season to throttle that and get it right, and understand, they've got a hell of a lot more data at their fingertips than Peter or I do. They can sort of understand certain demand for certain players as and when they come into form. If they get injured, I can imagine seeing, a slowdown in auctions and a drop off. They maybe haven't been as smart with that in previous years, but I just feel with the team that they have in place and what we've seen thus far the last number of weeks, I have a bit more confidence in them to get that right. They're not just going to throw out 1,000 cards by Christmas and go, okay, you guys play the secondary market, do what you can, So yeah, I feel like I've got a bit more confidence in the team to throttle it correctly. That's not to say they won't make mistakes and we won't call them out for it, but maybe less than the last couple of years.
I think the thing that's been also interesting, I just checked the market maybe a couple hours ago. It looks like we're about 30% of the way, 33% of the way through like Rodri sales, or what they have in terms of what they can auction, if we're still going with the 60-40 split. I mean, who knows if that's still the case or if that's not the case. But assuming that they're about a third of the way through, that's really good. At least it seems like there's enough users willing to pay a pretty good price. And
That's for rare, right?
Yeah, for rare. For limited, we're seeing about 10 to 14%. So much farther back in terms of what they're supplying. And that's expected. I mean, that you don't want to totally crash the limited market. And it's good to see that they're understanding that each scarcity needs to be tuned on the auction supply a little bit to make sure that they're not just killing demand. Because if they were at 33% of limited sales, like we'd be looking at 200 limited cards. The rest of the market would suffer because there'd be so many star cards out that why would you ever buy a tier 3 or a tier 4? So it kind of limits what they could sell otherwise. And also, if we go down the tiers from star to tier 1, we see about 10% less cards being sold, tier 1 to tier 2, another 10 to 15%. So we're seeing like this nice balance of they're getting the star cards out. They're recognizing that maybe these T1s, these T2s might be more valuable. We don't know exactly what their roles are going to be. They could shoot up if we discover someone new is on pens or someone new is on corners, and now everybody wants to get those. Well, they'll have a few extra cards that they hadn't sold yet whose prices could go up. Now, of course, it's a dangerous game. Maybe someone gets injured, but it's a good balance, I think, that they're finding.
Do you think that so I guess one of the things that I've seen people talk about, and it seems to apply to rare, and I'm worried that some people will try to apply it to limited, which I don't think will ever apply. But essentially the idea was if Sorare get their allotment of rares out on the market as fast as possible, and Mike kind of wrote a potential schedule that they could do in terms of distributing the cards that they sell. The kind of hope is like at some point they run out, and so the secondary market gets to take over. And that if you do win these cards later on, they'll be more valuable because you're not necessarily competing against Sorare in terms of trying to sell a card. I don't see that happening at the limited level, because if they're not getting to 1,000 at all, then they're certainly not getting to, the 600 that they can sell by the end of, let's call it like November.
Yeah.
So should there be this kind of late season, mid-season, late season, secondary market optimism at all for limited?
I just don't think there's enough users right now to kind of be thinking in that mindset. I think you've kind of nailed it, because if, let's say that happens in rare and we start seeing prices go up, granted, we're not seeing that on the challenger side of things, but there's the complexity of the year-round model in challenger and contender. But let's say we saw that in rare and prices started getting pushed up. Well, the prize pools aren't going up. So all of a sudden, sort of that, maybe that potential return that you're making doesn't feel as reasonable when you could just go down to limited, where there's a lot more supply. So there just needs to be more users, I think, before we can even get in that mindset.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting what it does to the secondary market. Obviously, this promotion, you can see cards are going for more at auction than someone has listed it on the secondary market right now, because people are drawn in by the potential of the promotion and wanting to get the collection bonus. I think I've alluded to it in the last months or years or whatever, in terms of, as Peter said, there's only so much cash to go around right now, right? Whether that goes on the primary or the secondary, it's a competition, between the primary and the secondary market, and so we naturally want as much as possible to go through the primary. I can see the secondary market slowing down. I also remember speaking quite a while ago about how sentiment and secondary market activity are at least correlated in some way, which is quite interesting, because secondary market levels as a percentage of overall spend on the platform now are at their lowest. They have been since I started tracking this in 2021. But that's obviously with the promotion and everything going on. So, I think if people are content with holding their cards, and again, this also goes back to something else I was talking about eking out maximum utility. And Laird, I saw you posted about Leagues Cup and MLS teams this weekend. I feel your pain. you know, again, I didn't plan this in my head, but when I bought all these Brazilian cards at the start of the season, the amount of midweek league games that they have, and then Challenger's not open, like it's just shot me in the foot because there's only a couple of places I can play them, and now I don't know where I'm going to be able to play them. But, you know, I think if we can get this utility of using every single card, every game they play out of our head, and it's more, hey, I can pick and choose of my gallery who my best cards I want to use this week. That's not an easy shift. I completely realize that. And people want to spend as much of their budget on the best quality players that they have. But I think, you know, the secondary will probably take a hit. And we as users are only to blame for prices dropping if we're just listing on the secondary, because Sorare aren't necessarily going to stop their auctions. And if I'm at auction, I want to buy a card, or if I'm in the market for a card, if it's secondary or auction and they're the same price, I'd probably take an auction unless the secondary had a very high XP, because it will give me that little bit of collection bonus. Yeah, so I think that I was looking at some numbers earlier as well in terms of just looking at progress in terms of Sorare earnings since launch, since the 17th of July when Contender launched. If we compare the daily average activity across primary and secondary versus the first 6.5 months of the year, it's up 60%, right? It's really, really, really positive. However, if you compare that versus 2023, it's actually down 6%. Stay with me here, because if we just isolate the primary market, if we exclude secondary from this, it's up 164% versus the first part of 2024, which sounds even better, but actually it's well up on 2023. So as a proportion of dollars coming into the market, whether it's primary or secondary, it hasn't actually risen by all that much, but Sorare are taking a far larger share of it now, which, as naturally as you can see, then secondary takes a hit and people aren't listing as much, or maybe earn a little bit less. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic as auctions slow down and as people want to shift their galleries and they get fed up with this player not performing. What happens then? Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is, I guess we would need like the number of transactions that period, because it does feel like we are incentivized now more than ever to hold cards, which obviously reduces secondary market revenue that Sorare generate, because if we're holding, then not to give them an out there, but the push has certainly been now like, buy these cards and please don't ever sell them.
Yeah. And I think people are becoming more accepting of that behavior. At least I know I'm becoming more accepting of that behavior. Like, I'm buying a card to hold a card. Probably the sharp move is to like buy and flip. I know Keith is really good at doing that. For me, once I do well with a card, I just want to hold on to the card. It's a proud moment for me in my gallery. And I like that feeling. But I think the concern I have when, you know, Mike goes through all these numbers, to me, they're good. Like, it's nice to see primary auctions moving in the right direction. But I personally need to get out of this frame of mind where it's like, okay, this is going to be consistent through the entire year, 365 days. It's not. We know cards have less utility, and they're also pumping out so many cards. Like, just as we talked about earlier with Rodri, they're 30% or 33% of the way through auctions. So they need to have gotten a lot more revenue up front than like we would have normally expected. And let's just say we're looking at champion cards and just assume that the number of champions minted is true as for contender and challenger. We obviously know contender and challenger have more mints, but let's just say it's the same as champion are so far. We're looking at 10 to 15% for limiteds. We're looking about 30% for rares, and 15 to 30% for super rares, just because there's fewer super rares, so that range is larger. They probably have needed at this point to have generated 13, 14, 15 million, assuming that prices stayed the exact same, because they're just minting so fast. I don't think they've made 13, 14, 15 million on auctions. Now, this is all assuming that their target is 60 million in revenue. I think Mike excellently pointed out kind of the French law, not necessary that that's getting enforced super strongly or if they have a grace period. But if that's their target of 60 million, it's not quite there. So maybe in the future, we might have to see that expectation of not being able to bring classic cards forward. That might incentivize people. Okay, I need to buy 5 new cards. Might make star cards way more expensive. It'll be unpopular, but like maybe that's how they need to push revenues up.
I like this question from Ben here. It said, is it a problem that a lot of the money being used on the auctions is money that people have won through previous competitions, which I think part of that is thresholds, which are going away, and not new money to the platform?
Can we pour one out for thresholds, by the way? Is it this last midweek?
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's sad. To answer Ben's question, it's actually the graph that I shared in the Medium article. Actually, that's sort of what I calculate is their net earnings. So essentially looking at what Sorare earn on the primary plus the secondary fee, minus the payouts for that week. So the yellow bar is like the net income, essentially, where last week they absolutely smashed past $3.5 million in a week. Obviously, there wasn't all the European competitions going on. We'll see what those prize pools sort of look like. Mike Baston, a minute's silence for threshold, probably. Chapeau. But yeah, so to answer Ben's question, this graph, the yellow bars, obviously, if we look around the end of May, it was not such a great time for Sorare. But, you know, and this is what I mean about the seasonality. You know, if everyone knew that this new pro concept in season, early access cards, we were all told this in February, right? So again, we got to give Sorare credit for actually telling us stuff well in advance and sticking to their 2 updates per year. So does the market from February give us an indication, you know, between February and now of what it will look like in the off early access sort of time of year? Of course, we'll have the European seasonality where it might just gradually slide. But you know, I think Sorare need to, as Peter says, make hay while the sun shines now. They've brought in over $9 million since the 17th of July, which is pretty damn solid. Again, by my calculations, I think they need to keep this pace up, or they can slow down a tiny bit, but they still need to earn nearly $2 million a week for the next 6 weeks to sort of hit that target that Peter and I were referencing. So yeah, does that answer Ben's question?
And I think just to add to Ben's question, I think there's a lot of thought that, you know, that money that's going out and then coming back in, that money that's going out is a cost to Sorare. Like they know that's a cost going into every game week. It's just been a variable cost. They don't know how much they're going to pay out on thresholds. And so that's a little scary. I think the concern that we should watch in the long term is, as we look at Mike's chart, if that red line consistently for a long time keeps getting closer and closer and closer to the blue line, that sort of gives us an indication that, okay, either new people aren't coming in to spend money or people are just using what they have on the platform. That's not a good sign. We should, of course, expect that to be closer. I mean, we look where the red line is now. It's not going to stay that. We all know that. Sorare know that. Like they recognize that, appreciate that. But it's just, what does that look like? What does that look like year over year? You know, hopeful side of me is that Sorare is around for years and years to come. But is next year, is that red bar even smaller? Like, are there less people willing to spend? And that's, I think, where we need more data. And it's hard to estimate that, that far in advance.
And now we know this $15 million prize pool. So that blue line is just it's not going to exactly flatline because it'll depend busier weeks, quieter weeks, etc. But we know it's just going to average, give or take, 300,000 a week. All that said, all my calculations here are actually including NBA and MLB. So I'm looking at the total business. So of course there'll be other prize pools and other revenue on that side, but they're calculated in this. But it has to be said that football makes up a very large portion of everything.
The consistency, at least that they have now, in terms of like they know what they're paying out, really can't be understated. Like it. I think Threshold got away from them. It was one of these that like, oh yeah, we'll do this and we'll get people happy. And then all of a sudden it was like, it became such a hindrance on what they could do that I think like Ben's point of people are buying with money that they've had on the platform, and that is basically going away. Obviously plenty of people are still going to win, but like the easy money is gone after this midweek when we just clean up. And I think that's going to be like really, really interesting to see if the game is engaging enough and people think that they can win back enough where they say, yeah, I will put more money in, money that I used to just get from, All-Star Rare or from Cap 240, and instead actually put new money in.
I think a concern I have just with like the French law or whatever they've signed up for, and just to cover their costs, is they need to take like a 75% rake, 75% rake. That's a big rake. And a lot of people come into playing these sorts of daily fantasy or cash games not used to just being like, oh, the house is going to take this much money. And so it's a really difficult position for Sorare to be in. Like, maybe you can expect people to overpay by 30% or 40%, but can you get people to overpay by the amount you need? And that's where it's like, that's where the difficult questions start. Like how do you get them to, like, users to make Sorare profitable in a sense to hit that target?
Well, 75% cash rake. Don't forget card rewards, right? Don't forget card rewards, where if we use very simple mathematics, and obviously it doesn't translate this way, right? But let's say yearly revenue target 60 million, and that's based on selling 60% of the allocation. That means $40 million is equal to the other 40%. So actually they're giving away $40 million worth of card rewards over the course of a year, right? Of course, it doesn't work out like that because slanting over the course of the season, the same price isn't at the end of the season versus the beginning. But, you can look at it like that, where it's at least more than $15 million worth of cards that are being rewarded.
Yeah.
Peter's very puzzled at that, and I trust his brain more than mine, so maybe I've said something.
I think it gets a little like cyclical, and like I don't know if I fully agree with that. I think a lot of people, when you're buying an in-season card, you're playing it to win in season. Now you're right, you can win Essence, and you can win Essence every week, but that churn's not so great. Like, you're not playing your in-season card in the classic competitions for the most part. Like, you might occasionally do that. So that's where it's like, yes, but that's where classic cards and like Sorare need to earn that revenue every single year. So we're kind of like, I'm trying to look year to year on what that card can do. So I hear you. Yes, there's more than just the cash prizes, but that's like my foundation for a lot of the thought process.
Is there...
And Mike Baston also referenced credits there as well. That has put a spanner in the works for all my calculations on a weekly basis. But I looked at like Contender this week, where I think it's a pretty full schedule in Contender. Most leagues are on. And it looks like, based on the number of entries, they'll give away about $8,000 worth of market credits this week in all the reward boxes. We still need to see what the entry numbers are like for Premier League, Bundesliga, Champ, etc., etc. But give or take, that's probably going to be a 50K a week hit on their earnings. That's just a finger in the air. I'll be able to provide a more accurate figure in a few weeks.
That's the expectation, that every credit is used? I mean, obviously it's a
exactly.
liability, but like I imagine as somebody who's currently sitting on nearly $700 worth of MLB credits, I can assure you they don't all get used.
Yeah, that's a good point. But is there an expiry on the credits? They got to be used in 28 days or something, or
They have to be used within 28 days, but if you win a new one, it resets to that date.
so like the cumulative resets. So if you keep winning, you don't ever have to spend anything.
Correct.
Interesting.
Now they have kind of this. They have kind of a scheduled buffer when it comes to baseball because the off season is more than 28 days, and so effectively I'll lose it over the off season if I don't use it. But we don't really have that in football unless you just play champion. And yeah,
Major NFT with 2K and MLB credits is wild.
that's crazy. What do you think about this? Nanzo saying that the credits actually work in their in Sorare's favor because it pushes auction prices up.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It's a tricky thing. If the person who wins the auction is using a credit, it doesn't actually push up their revenue.
On the face of it, it does, and psychologically, what it does to a user, if I know I can only spend $50 on a $100 card, then I'm inclined to put the extra bit in there where previously I might have stopped at $85 because that's what I felt it was worth. But because I've got this free money, I might be inclined to throw 100 at it instead, as an example. So yes, in a way, but as Peter says, it's not actually, well, in a way it is helping their bottom line, right? But not to the full effect of the $100.
I think it comes down to, and maybe there's a way in the API to track if an auction one used a credit, because that would be helpful to know. But it's one of those things. It's like, okay, but at the end of the day, who spent the money? Like, who spent the money on the auction? Was it the person with the credit, or did the person without the credit just bow out? And
I've circumstantially heard basically both sides from people who play baseball that they will either overpay, quote, overpay for one because the money out of their pocket is less. And those who will not pay more than kind of the recent amount, including their credit, because they want the full 25% discount or what I think it's 25% on MLB. And yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens when they're kind of more widespread in football, because again, like maybe this actually separates the primary market from the secondary market even more in terms of how much it costs on instant buy or an auction versus the secondary market, because you can't use that credit. And surely lots of calls for saying, let us use them on the secondary market, which Sorare will happily just throw in the bin.
and Nanzo makes a good point. Like, and I think Mike mentioned this as well. When people start seeing that auction prices are higher, that's kind of the new floor in their mind. It'll just depend on what secondary is also going for. Sure, you don't get the collection score. Don't get me wrong, that 20 points for the collection aren't meaningless. But if we're starting to see some pretty big discrepancies between the two, I think that's just going to point people to, okay, I'm just going to get a secondary. And I wonder if that could be potentially harmful, because someone's like, why would I pay 20% more when I can just get something off the secondary market? Now, will secondary market prices go up because of that? I don't know. There's a lot of supply. I'm not sure there's enough users for that, but maybe they're benefited in that way as well.
You touched on something there that I meant to bring up earlier, when I think, Mike, you were saying that the promo, I was going to call it a promo FOMO, but basically like you want it, but basically that is what it is. Yeah. I find myself less interested in the promos when looking at either instant buys or auctions, and more about collection bonus. Even with cards that I have no intent of building a collection around, but it's more like a just in case. I don't want to start at 10 if I can start at 40, 30 or 40, whatever it is. And I wonder if if enough other people feel that way, then when the promotions are gone, and obviously the promotions make it even more attractive, but I do wonder if something happens with collections where they just make it even more detrimental to buy on the secondary market. Like they basically always have that collection part in their back pocket of like, we're just making it 10 more, 10 more collection points if you buy from us. And that just pushes the secondary market even further away.
That's good and bad. I would say if they make collection score too high, then you need to buy less cards from that club. So there's a balance to find, because then if there's less cards to buy, you're buying less players and you're buying less worse players.
That's fair. Where was Nanzo's comment here? So going back to Mike's chart, and this is a very popular line from people who play super rare. Use the blue line, which are the reward payouts, to push the red line up. What do we think?
No, sorry.
It needs to get pushed up 4 times more, basically. Like you're not pushing it up 1 to 1. And that's a tricky balance to find.
Ultimately, that's the pushback on super rare, is that the prize is like, if you make the prizes better, people will buy super rares. And that was kind of the huge thing when they introduced cap 240 to all the scarcities. And it was like, oh, threshold to super. Yes, super rares now look like something I want to buy. And now that's gone. And it feels like we've seen this like very, I don't even want to call it steady, but it's been steadily, drastically going down value of super rares, that the only kind of solutions I've seen are just make the prizes better. And so rare don't seem to be in a position to want to do that.
No, I can very much understand the sentiment, and in one way you can look at it, it's a chicken and egg scenario,
right?
But unfortunately, I think it doesn't hold water purely on a volume basis, right? And especially if we look at super rare and unique, right? We take Nanzo, Pranksy, whoever else, they will pay whatever the price, like whatever price a unique Saka or whoever it is comes in, Pranksy's probably going to pay for it, right? But that's only going to cost him more than what Nanzo or whoever else is bidding at auction is going to pay for it. But I don't think, irrespective of whether the prize pool were to 4x, if that's going to draw in 4x the amount of users who are going to bid against Pranksy at auction and push Saka's price up 4x, it just won't happen. I would love to be proven wrong, but I just cannot see it in that scenario.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it'll also be, Mike talked a lot about having like these sorts of windows when like we might see more buying activity. Like we're seeing it with early access. We might see it around the winter transfer once people have kind of settled in, new moves. But it would be great if like Sorare could create other periods of like transfer activity, and having some sort of promotion in your back pocket. I've said and spoken about how I'd love for them to like lean into the special edition cards a little bit more, and just maybe, not have it every month or so, but maybe have a 1 or 2 periods in the year, kind of like these quarterly points where it's like, okay, we're going to do a week or 2 long of like some sort of special card celebrating something. Maybe it's all away kits in like in the fall, and maybe some sort of like Sorares in like March or April. And we just sort of lean into, there's going to be some special edition cards at this point. It's going to be exciting. You can buy them, increases some transfer activity, but you can also win them. If you're not a player that wants to spend some money, you can go out and grab your own cards and try to win one. So there's a little bit of engagement on both sides. I know that there's this balance of wanting to have specials be special, but it would also be great to use them just effectively to make the market buzz a little bit more. Give me a reason to get on the transfer market. Like I've really enjoyed the early access period. Like it was fun to just be watching the market. I would log in a few times a day to see like where things are at, or if there's a player that I want to grab that's coming up on auction soon. And I think we need to kind of create that experience a little bit more, but also make it happen on the gameplay side.
I'm just already seeing the tweets of people like, oh, Sorare's just artificially pushing the market up with these special edition cards. And
yeah, I mean, the special edition, any cards that are bought now, what is is it a 10% chance that it's a special edition, or what's the percentage chance?
10, yeah.
Is 10% really that special? Like, do we think special, the 10% special cards, once they're all unraveled and unwrapped out of their packaging, are specials going to sell on the secondary for more than non-special cards?
I think they might sell like a % or two more. I don't think it'll be anything crazy, but it's also not going to be a huge number of cards. Like Rodri's sold, we'll probably have seen 90 cards out by the time the special edition, all this is wrapped up. That's only 9 special edition cards. Like that number feels bigger than it really is. Like that's only 1 or 2 rares, maybe 2 or 3. Like, and
is that how do we know that that's how they're doing it though? 10% per player?
Well, it's 10%. It says this card has a 10% chance. So the assumption would be, but you're right. Maybe some players have less, some players have more. But just averaging out, generalizing it a little bit. It's not like there's going to be 50 launch edition cards or whatever.
Right.
Like that's what the Premier League, those launch edition cards are cool, but every card has them. So it kind of takes away from it a little bit. And I think that's what we keep on, like that's what I keep on using as my frame of reference. But in reality, that's not going to be quite the case here.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think
they're all like they are more powerful collection cards. So I would understand if they did have a premium if you tried to sell them on the secondary market.
Oh, do they have more of a collection bonus as well?
They're considered like
oh yeah, I suppose. Yeah, like a jersey mint or whatever.
Right.
But I saw just a tiny bit back in the chat, Major NFT and Nanzo referring to the league specials and how they influence prices. That I definitely agree with, and it's maybe unfortunate that Sorare have shown their hand with saying this is our prize pool for the season, but having as Peter was alluding to, market promotions and things are obviously great, but also every so often, if there's a special event or something big around the calendar, like Christmas, New Year football is massive for the Premier League in England. There's games on Boxing Day and everything. If there's big prize pools for that, if they're inflated prize pools, those types of things are gonna draw people in, I think, and make people think twice in the week or two leading up to it. Hey, yeah, I'll throw an extra couple of £100 at that because I'd love to have a chance of winning 10,000 this week instead of the standard 3,000 in rare. I think if they can play around with that could maybe help them nudge a little bit in periods of need.
Do I want to say this? I'll say it. I had somebody at Sorare tell me that the 15 million is a minimum.
Okay.
Given this whole conversation, I can't imagine they go much higher, but I was told it's a minimum of 15. So they theoretically could like blast out a special weekly around Christmas if and not necessarily think this has to fit into that 15 million figure.
Yeah. How many ears have you got, Laird?
How many what?
How many ears have you got?
I have 2.
Yeah, minimum of 2. And a maximum of 2.
Just telling what I've been told.
No, that's me being cynical. Let's not get any cynicism back in the room again after last time. But no, I mean, absolutely. I think, and they genuinely mean that. If they can bolster their revenue, of course, they want to be able to do more and draw more people in. So yeah, I think 50 million is a minimum. I'm happy with that. If there's more, then great. There's an added bonus. Do you think, like, obviously there's been no talk at all. How do we feel? Obviously, we poured one out and had a few seconds of silence for Threshold. How do we feel that's going to impact things going forward now? And do we think that Sorare will ever introduce any PvE style of format again?
I would think that anyone who joined the platform within the last 6 months, maybe, it's not nearly as big as a loss as those of us who have been around for much longer. And I was talking to, I think it was with Keith the other day. I sent him a lineup that I had from like game week 200 or something like that. But it was like, I had 3 players. I scored like 215 points, and it was like, this paid me $25, which is like, 8th place now in some competitions. And I had 2 DNPs, and it was like, we really did not appreciate like how easy it was to win.
Yeah.
And you could even go back to when before they had to peg it to the US dollar, and the amount of ETH that they were giving away for like 0.01 ETH for scoring 205 points in a lineup that included a common card. It's just like, everyone who experienced that, I think, is going to have, like, we've had plenty of time to know that this is coming, but I think it's going to be a massive adjustment for a lot of users. You just have to hope that the majority of users are those who joined fairly recently and that the money didn't feel as free.
Yeah. I mean, we as longer in the tooth users look at it as, Threshold going. But actually, if you flip it the other way, was it one of the greatest acquisition strategies ever? Like you say, in terms of free money, hey, tell your friends, hey, that the booms that happened, it got a lot of people hooked in,
Sure.
right? And okay, there's some people who are leaving, but there's not many people who have thrown the toys out the pram and sold their gallery just because Threshold is going. I don't believe. I mean, I'm sure there are some, but we're still here, and user numbers are still growing, maybe not as fast as we would like them to, but
I think we will look back at it as just that, like one of the greatest user acquisition strategies.
Yeah.
But I don't think we necessarily look at it like that now.
Yeah. That's what
and again, we also haven't actually experienced it yet.
Yeah.
It's also
I haven't won one in months. So.
Yeah, the last time I think I won them was when MLS had those double game weeks, and I was just like pumping out the 340 score, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's fallen apart since then. I will say, from a UI standpoint, it'll be nice to have the cap modes gone, because it's been a little bit of a mess with the cap modes in there, because you can tell that they are designing the UI to not have the cap modes in there, but it's had to be in there for the last few times, and it's not made it an enjoyable experience. So I'm looking forward to the button.
Bring on the button.
There
was a little egg timer on the Sorare Data Twitter just before we joined. Was that just in anticipation for us, or was that alluding to something else?
Just it's a big week for Sorare Data, and this obviously was the perfect way to kick off the week. That's all. Last question for you guys. It's gone a little longer. Is there anything, like, once everything started all the cards started to come out, auctions went, what was like the first thing, and Mike, maybe your whole Medium post gave away what you looked at like right away, but what were some of the things that you wanted to see, either how the market reacted or how many cards Sorare put out? Like, what were some of the things that you were excited to see, and then what'd you feel when you saw them?
You go first, Pete.
Like, do you mean like, what was I excited about these past couple of weeks with Sorare?
basically, yeah, like, or not so much what were you excited to, like, obviously you get excited to like start bidding on cards and whatnot, but it was kind of like were the prices that you thought we would have to pay, are they in line with what you thought, or like where?
It was so appealing that I thought, from the prices standpoint, they were so appealing that I was a little bummed I had like gone FOMO and started buying some classic cards. I'm still enjoying my classic cards, but a part of me is like, oh man, I could have a killer in season Prem gallery if I didn't do that. That's okay. But it also was just exciting to finally have, like, you have all these ideas and plans and like, how's it all going to fit together? And it's nice to finally see that starting to come into the gallery and being like, okay, I have these pieces. I have these small little gaps. I think I sent you all like my like Prem lineups, and I'm like, this is still what I'm missing, but look at how it's all coming together and this flexibility that I feel like I have. And it's just exciting. Like, I'm looking forward to this game week. I'm looking forward to watching the Prem. Not something I always have on, but I'll definitely have on this weekend. And it's a really great experience. Like, I'm having a lot of joy looking forward to this game week.
Just to have your hopes crushed and ruined.
I didn't want to.
Yeah, but even then, it's, I have I'll probably have 2 or 4 lineups out. I'll probably at worst get a box or 2. Like, and it's just nice. Like, there's something to look forward to with these game weeks. And it's true on the MLS. Like, I play a lot of MLS Challenger. I've really enjoyed the in-season stuff. I feel like it's a little bit more of the competition style that I like playing, where, it's basically just been an MLS season tournament for the summer. And just those single league tournaments are really fun. Like, I've kind of enjoyed going away from the global style and just being a little bit more specialized and having a little bit more expertise in one league. It feels like I know a little bit more of what's going on, and I'm not just missing some random Austrian Bundesliga player who's going off. That's like, oh, he has a great match. Like, there's that joy that I have kind of back for the first time in a little bit.
Yeah, and you also know who you're competing against. Playing in the Premier League, you don't have that random Austrian Bundesliga guy who's going to bang 100 against you. You're going to be like, I've never heard of him. That's unfair. I've got Odegaard and Isaac and whoever, So yeah, no, I agree with you. I think, Laird, to answer your question, I mean, I kind of alluded to it in my post as well. When I wrote that 20 days ago, I think Sorare had done close to 7, and I thought estimated they would have been happier in the 8 to 9 million figure. They've now hit that 9 million, and I think that's my takeaway is they've actually managed to sustain this still. Now, let's see what it's like in a couple of days' time when the promotion ends. But so far, the signs are good in terms of sustaining both their volume that's coming in, and also, we've seen a little bit of up and down, but, there hasn't been anything crazy in terms of price levels on cards going one way or the other. It's actually really interesting, some of the ups and downs, the dips, and coming back, in such a short period. And there's a little bit of that FOMO. I was just looking at David Raya there at Arsenal, and like, he started off at like $180. Within a day, he was down to 120. A couple of days after that, he was back up to 180. Then he dropped down to 120 again. He's back up now at 190 again. Like, those are quite significant variations in the course of a couple of weeks. But it's not all going one way. So it's kind of fun. So I've been impressed. They've done well.
So are you saying I should sell my David Raya card that I bought?
What did you buy him for? Did you buy him at the right time?
I think I got him for like 130 or so.
Sounds like you should sell him at 190.
No, but I'm going to win it this week in Div 5. I'm going to win Div 5 with the other 2,000 users that are probably.
Does the top prize in Div 5 allow you to buy a Raya?
I think it's like $70.
Probably like $30 or something.
But then you're in Div 4 and you'll be flying in no time.
But, we're complaining about that. I'm glad that the division, like, they've made those tweaks. I know we talked about it a few weeks ago, but it's a good adjustment. Like, I was in Div 1 Challenger this week playing, And it just felt good that I had lineups in Div 1 Challenger. Like I felt like I could kind of play and get rewarded. Like I didn't have the best game week, but I feel like I got more cash than I would do with my MLS lineups over the summer. And that's good. Like I'm glad I stayed up in Div 1 for that experience.
Peter, what? Sorry, Lara, just because Peter, what about a challenge between the two of us? Like we're both starting in Premier League D5. First one to get D1 has to. The other one has to buy them a Newcastle shirt, Newcastle jersey.
Love it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deal?
Good. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, we're on.
Let's go. Peter's going to finally make his first DH gate buy.
I'm just going to do a slew of buys today.
Well, that's
more than what the Newcastle movies were.
Dan just messaged me and said, "Hey, can you get Peter to spend a bit more at the auction there?" So that's part of their strategy.
Are you going to start bidding him up again too?
Yeah.
Knock into the
Exactly.
Smart.
Yeah.
Smart. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. That was a lot of fun, and I think it was pretty helpful for a lot of people. Just, I think what's really nice about having you guys on, particularly together, is that a lot of people look at Sorare from different angles, and I think you guys particularly look at them differently than a lot of people. And everyone hears them, and they're like, "Oh man, that is really, really a good way to look at it." So thank you for joining me. Thanks everyone for coming in. If you could please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to Quinny. And yeah, Sorare Data shows are back all this week. I'll be back tomorrow with Harry. We're going to try to win Premier League Division 1 because I'm in Division 1.
Ooh, show off.
And we're going to try to do it with $200. $1,500 top prize. I'm going to spend $200 tomorrow. Maybe less. Who knows? We'll see. But anyway, thank you to everybody, and good luck out there.